All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another PowerPoint. So as I mentioned in my previous video, I got myself a new favorite author in Hernan Diaz, and this will be me talking about his second book, his latest book, called Trust. This one won a Pulitzer Prize, so it's not like I discovered a hidden gem or anything like that. But let me assure you, this Pulitzer is well deserved. And well, I don't know if I need to give a spoiler alert, but of course I will talk about the premise and the structure of this book because otherwise I won't be able to talk about this book. All right. So the whole thing is centered around a guy named Andrew Bevel. Now there's two things you need to know about him. He is filthy rich. He's a multi-gazillionaire who made a fortune investing money and being one of the few who got through the great stock market crash in the early 20th century somewhat unscathed. So as you can imagine, most of this takes place during the first decades of the 20th century. Also, you need to know that he was married to a wife who is now deceased, so he's a widower. Right, so that's what you need to know. He's rich and he's a widower, I guess. Anyway, also his wife wrote a diary. That's also something we know about her, aside from that she's dead. Anyway, all right. So our main character here, Andrew Bevel, he finds out that someone has decided to write a fictional book based on the life of himself and his now deceased wife. The names are changed, a lot of details have changed, but Bevel realizes that everyone will know that this is based on his story, a bit like how the movie Citizen Kane was based on the millionaire Randolph Hearst. And just like Randolph Hearst, Bevel is not amused. So Bevel decides to write his own memoirs, kind of as a rebuttal, a means to take back his own story. And he starts writing a draft. And he soon realizes that he doesn't have the time for this nonsense. So he hires a ghostwriter. And this ghostwriter later on writes a biography for herself where she tells about her encounters with Andrew Bevel, and she also eventually finds the diaries of his deceased wife, and there it is. That's the story pretty much. And it's, well, overall it's just absolutely beautifully written. It's a story that sucked me in immediately. I had a really hard time every time I had to pause the audiobook and start working or whatever. Now, as for the structure, this is kind of interesting. This is why I needed the PowerPoint. So the book is divided into four very distinct parts. So part one is that fictional book within the book, the fictional account of Bevel's life. Part two is his rather crude draft of his memoirs before he gives up and hires the ghostwriter. Part three is the memoirs of this ghostwriter telling us about their interactions. And part four is from the diaries of his wife. And I would say any of these parts in the book, maybe with the exception of the second one, they could all be really, really good short stories on their own. And they would be just amazing. But now we get all these great stories and they are interconnected. And the question that arises are, what really happened, of course? Who is this Bevel? How did he make his fortune? What happens to his wife? And the key here, I think, is negative space, paying attention to what is not told in these various accounts of his story. This makes it I'm not a scholar, but I'm pretty sure this makes it a postmodern story. And what makes it really interesting is that it's a postmodern story set at a time where modernism was at its peak. And modernism is making a huge mark on the story. More specifically, capitalism and how monetary wealth dictates truth. It can be viewed as a story about Northern America in general, New York in particular, but no, it's about capitalism. Maybe that's just my own reading. No, it's not. It's capitalism. And there's also the aspect of the female voice getting completely lost in this process. His deceased wife is everyone. All these books, in one way or another, are centered around her, but it's not until the very, very, very end that we get to hear from her. And it's really unclear that if anyone had heard her voice earlier, if they had cared at all. Anyway, where was I? Okay, well, this in general, this is kind of American fiction writing at its very best. Is it the great American novel? Well, it's a great American novel, and leave it to others to argue the finer points. The only thing that maybe bothered me a little bit is that I would have liked some more info regarding the first part, the book within the book. Who wrote this book within the book? That would have been really interesting. And I'm also not entirely sure if we needed that final part, those diary entries. I'm not saying that I have an answer, but I'm thinking, how would it? Could it have been replaced with something else? I don't know. That's for a reread. This was certainly one of the best books I've read in many, many years, and you should go read it immediately. Did I say I wrote the book? I mean, I of course meant that I read one of the best books I've read, not one of the best books that I've written, if I misspoke. You understand. Okay, I've been rambling on too long anyway. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.